I wanted to write something that would have the same kind of impact on readers as The Pillars of the Earth and World Without End. So Fall of Giants is the first of a trilogy. The trilogy will tell the entire history of the 20th century through the eyes of 5 families. And Fall of Giants is about the beginning of the 20th century. It's about the First World War and the Russian Revolution. And we see these sweeping historic events through the eyes of families, people who lived through the events, fictional people who have their own dramas and their own ambitions, their own agendas, their own stories, passions, falling in love and having children and hating people and getting revenge and all that sort of thing. But I also wanted, as well as telling what it was like to be alive then, I also want readers to understand these great events, because I think although we know that the Russian Revolution happened and that there was a First World War, we don't know why these things happened. So some of my characters are decision makers, or they're very close to the decision makers. They're people who are very close to the Prime Minister or the President or the Kaiser. And so they're in the room when the decision is made, when somebody says, are we going to mobilize our army or not? And they make the decision, yes, we have to mobilize, because I think, first of all, it's exciting and dramatic, and secondly, we want to understand why they made those decisions. So what I hope is that readers of Fall of Giants will not only know what it was like to live through those events and become engaged with these characters, but will also understand why those things happened and how things turned out the way they did. Needless to say, there was a great deal of research required for Fall of Giants, and some of it I did here at the Imperial War Museum. They have objects here. It's very important to see the objects, you know, to look at the rifles and hand grenades and so on that they handled. I also saw here a telegram. The only time I've ever seen an actual example of the famous telegrams that came in the First World War to the homes of the parents of men who'd been killed in France. In order to make sure that my research is accurate, I normally employ experts to check my books before they're published, and in the case of Fall of Giants, it was quite a major task. I ended up, in fact, employing 8 historians, most of them professors of history at universities in the UK and the USA and Germany, to check my work, and they all read the first draft, some of them read the second draft and sent me long reports. And so I hope that there will be no mistakes in Fall of Giants, or at least no more mistakes than there are in the average history book. At the beginning of Fall of Giants, we have a German family. They are diplomats, and the character we're interested in is young Walter, who is in intelligence. He's a military attaché at the German embassy in London, but he's actually a spy. The Russian family is 2 brothers, one hard-working, sensible, a planner, the other a bit of a party lover. And their great dream is to go to America, but only one of them is going to make it. There's an American family. Young Gus Dewar is kind of awkward socially and a bit funny looking, but very smart. And he works in the White House. He's an aide to President Woodrow Wilson. And then there are 2 British families, an aristocratic family, very wealthy, very posh, the Fitzherberts, and finally a coal mining family who actually dig the coal underneath the land owned by the Fitzherberts. I suppose my favourite character is Ethel. She's a pretty, sexy young woman, the daughter of a coal mining family, but she works as a housekeeper for the Fitzherberts. And as you'll see, when you read the story, she has the potential to be a lot more than just a maid. "The generals won," said Anton. standing in front of the tomb of Edward the Confessor in Westminster Abbey on Friday, 31st of July, 1914. The Tsar gave in yesterday afternoon. The Russians are mobilizing. It was a death sentence. Walter felt a cold chill around his heart. It is the beginning of the end, Anton went on, and Walter saw in his eyes the glitter of revenge. The Russians think they're strong because their army is the largest in the world, but they have weak leadership. It will be Armageddon. It was the second time this week that Walter had heard that word, but this time he knew it was justified. In a few weeks' time, the Russian army of 6 million men, 6 million, would be massed on the borders of Germany and Hungary. No leader in Europe could ignore such a threat. Germany would have to mobilize. The Kaiser no longer had any choice. There was nothing more Walter could do. In Berlin, the General Staff were pressing for German mobilization, and the Chancellor, Theodor von Bethmann-Hollweg, had promised a decision by noon today. This news meant there was only one decision he could possibly take. Walter had to inform Berlin immediately. He took an abrupt leave of Anton and went out of the great church. He walked as fast as he could through the little street called Storey's Gate, jogged along the eastern edge of St. James's Park, and ran up the steps by the Duke of York's memorial and into the German embassy. The ambassador's door was open. Prince Lichnowsky sat at his desk, and Otto stood beside him. Gottfried von Kessel was using the telephone. There were a dozen other people in the room, with clerks hurrying in and out. Walter was breathing hard. Panting, he spoke to his father. "What's happening?" "Berlin has received a cable from our embassy in St. Petersburg that just says, first day of mobilization, 31st July. Berlin is trying to confirm this report." "What is von Kessel doing?" "Keeping the phone line to Berlin open so that we hear instantly." Walter took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Your Highness," he said to Prince Lichnowsky. "Yes?" "I can confirm the Russian mobilization. My source told me less than an hour ago." "Right." Lichnowsky reached for the phone, and von Kessel gave it to him. Walter looked at his watch. It was 10 minutes to 11. In Berlin, just short of the noon deadline. Lichnowsky said into the phone, "Russian mobilization has been confirmed by a reliable source here." He listened for a few moments. The room went very quiet. No one moved. "Yes," Lichnowsky said at last, "I understand. Very well." He hung up with a click that sounded like a thunderclap. "The Chancellor has decided," he said, and then he repeated the words Walter had been dreading. "Zustand drohender Kriegsgefahr." Prepare for imminent war.